judge the universe. If anything, evolution and life and societal pressure, those judge us. It's very much the way around.
Absolutely, yeah. But the environment or the universe seems to be the only true judgment initiator, right? Like everything else, like we talked about last week or last time with truth versus it is true. Like truth is more or less when the environment just says, you know what, you got this experiment's over. You don't have really any way to stop that. But something being true is a matter of perspective. Anyway, one thing I want to talk about with the Samaritan and how that this kind of actually, and I alluded to it in our text, ties into our Paul series is, I really look at the characters in the Bible and I ask myself, why? Because first you have to operate under the presumption to be able, it's interesting, to be able to be objective, you have to take both perspectives under their presumptions for a minute and try to Iron Man them. So, throughout this journey of mine, I've tried to Iron Man both perspectives, the kind of evolutionist atheist perspective and the the theist, biblical and even, I've read the Quran, and so I've looked at a lot. And one thing that's interested me is why characters are selected and why their roles are selected. So Jesus was a carpenter and he's also a builder of society, right? And it's interesting that a lawyer asks this question and it's a Samaritan on the road, because Paul, after Jesus dies, on a road is going to be kind of the ultimate, from a Christian perspective, he's going to structure the church. He's going to have an awakening on a road and structure the entire church from after being kind of the oppressor. So he's the oppressor. He's on a road. He kind of recognizes what he's done, and he has two options there, right? When you recognize how flawed you are, what can you do? You can beat the crap out of yourself about it. You can, let it kill you, or you can pick yourself up and allow yourself the grace to become a different kind of person. And Paul is going to experience exactly what the Samaritan parable is here, just not less than 2.5 years later. So this is a very interesting, in my opinion, and non-discussed parallel that we see from a parable that Jesus preaches to the construction of the church.
Well, there's something to say, like Paul's example humanizes Christ, because that's one issue about the what the church or what the Christians push. We're supposed to be like this perfect guy.
Yeah.
So Paul's repentance in that regard sort of brings all of it down to earth. Like, this is something that we can actually take seriously and work with.
Yeah, Paul's repentance shows that. See, and I think this gets really, because Paul's writings get misrepresented, and some of Paul's writings, frankly, Paul was a man as well. He was, anointed in my opinion, but he was a man who was flawed like all of us. And so some of his writings may be flawed. Who knows? But what Paul's message conveyed in the story was that even if you've killed Christians, ordered their stonings, you're capable of not just, overcoming such and forget the Christianity component of it. If you've killed a person in the world and you're an atheist, it's okay to forgive yourself and not kill someone else too. At the core level, Paul's story tells you it's okay to turn around and do the other thing. It's okay to reflect upon your actions and decide they weren't right, on the highest level. And that's something that Paul's entire message. So there might be parts of Paul's letters that people can misrepresent, or that were in fact not necessarily, the best possible outcome or the best possible thing to propose. That's okay. But the story of Paul really should convey to everyone that it's that giving everyone permission to kind of, no matter how crappy you've been, forgive yourself and then also help other people forgive themselves too, which is really the main principle. And when we think about the way society works out their problems today, and from if you go to the Hill, it is a bunch of finger pointing and accusation and not a lot of understanding, right? It seems like the first step to understanding is being able to say, look, my bad, I've done some things wrong, and this is what I'm trying to accomplish to kind of meet a better person that I am, and maybe we can all be there together. But no one wants to do that, and so it is important that Paul shows this conversion, because if people behaved in that manner today, things would be a lot different on a mainstream level.
Do you know why it's important to forgive?
I know why it's important to forgive myself is because a lot of reasons. I have to forgive myself because if I can't forgive myself, I won't be able to forgive others. It's important to forgive because I need forgiveness from someone else.
That's part of the idea with the Be Your Own Grace, right? If you can't forgive yourself, how can you forgive other people?
Yeah, and you need forgiveness. And that's the thing too. Like, you don't just need forgiveness from yourself to yourself. It's an objective reality that you're going to screw up. So you grant forgiveness before your own screw up because you know you're going to screw up and need forgiveness in return.
You can certainly be proactive about it, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Forgiveness is for the forgiver.
Yep, exactly. At every time.
If you can't forgive, you can't let it go. If you can't let it go, it just eats at you.
It's like this perpetual cycle, and we've all experienced it. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I know I've experienced it, and where the perpetual cycle of not forgiving someone or something or some situation, like, just causes almost a PTSD response to where you have these like moments of either complete denial, avoidance, or outburst. And it's like, yeah, when it comes to that specific situation or person. And so it's one of those things where if you can't just forgive, you kind of just, it's like this door you don't ever want to open. It's like this, and then because you've closed that door, everything else around you becomes a little bit less optional. You have a little less options everywhere you go. So it's like, now I can't show forgiveness here because I didn't show forgiveness when someone else did this to me also. And so I'm going to close this door too. And then before you know it, you just don't have you've isolated yourself, even if people are around you.
Well, forgiveness gets rid of that cloud, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Without forgiveness, you don't really. It's always a matter of when's this guy going to come back and get me back?
Yeah. I mean, on some personal, like, there's times in relationships and marriages that are hard. My wife's had to forgive me, and I've had to forgive her at different times in our marriage on some pretty large things. And without the ability to do that, you don't find a better, there's a level of peace you gain when you forgive, that after that, you're able to like see a different perspective in every relationship you're in. So it actually, just forgiving one time on a hard situation ends up giving you better relationships in every other non-direct impacted relationship in your life. So every part of your life improves in these relationships because of that.
That's, that side effect I hadn't thought about that, but it's true. When you stress out, it does affect everything. It does get everywhere.
And so, yeah, like, if you come home from work after a stressful day and you had a bad patient or client or whatever, sometimes, not every time, but sometimes you might take it out on those closest to you. But
sure rolls downhill. You have a bad day at work, you yell at your wife,
yep.
She yells at the kids, the kid kicks the dog chases the cat,
it's
the
this,
cat pees in your pillow.
But if you have this, if you have this baked in reflective grace that just kind of operates like a computer program you put in yourself, then when you get home, you're not carrying those things with you, and it allows you to be yourself. See, that's the most important part. Without that, you're allowing this situation back here to dictate the person you are in a different setting. So it's not just that it might impact the other relationships, it will impact every relationship if you don't have that self-Samaritan component of that reflective grace kind of baked in.
That's right. This guy laying on the side of the ditch, that's not really him. He's the guy who wears his clothes and has his stuff and has his goals. The guy laying in the ditch, that's a ragdoll, man. That's a side effect.
Yep.
So yeah, letting it go means being yourself. All right, so we're just about at 45 minutes. I thought we'd wrap up by talking about the lawyer's answer. Do you remember what it is?
Yeah, let me pull it up here. Well, in reply, Jesus. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Here we go.
So the whole idea was the lawyer's like, well, what's the law say? Or Jesus is like, well, what's the law say? The guy says, well, treat your neighbor like yourself. And
who is my neighbor? Yeah.
About who the neighbor is. And will you read the last two verses?
Yeah. The expert in the law. Oh, I'm sorry. Which of these three robbers do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? 36. The expert in the law replied to Jesus, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise.
Yep. So the lawyer basically says, okay, I'm dropping all my objections.
Yep.
Right? No. The merciful guy is who I would like to be treated by. And as a side effect, that's who he wants to be. Yeah.
Well, and we might get into more physics discussions later, but when we think about what, the world is, we kind of have these perspectives that we all agree on, like the roads and stuff. we all but you have a lot of quantum waves that go on. The neighbor is everyone. It's a vessel. That's why the vessel component's important in Christ. Everybody is a neighbor. It's a structured based thinking. Me and you talk about this a lot. You have to think in structures. And so basically, and that's why Jesus talks about make your, the structure, the rock underneath this bed of sand, the strong structure. So in other words, the real structure that you cannot see. And basically, in this sense, the structure is this ability, this reflective kind of ability, and I'm kind of losing my thought here. I completely lost my thought on that. Go on, pick it up.
I'm just trying to sum up. The parable is obviously supposed to be more than, it's just a parable. It's got to be a metaphor, but it can be a metaphor on multiple levels, I think is what the summary is. And then, of course, the lawyer drops his objections. Obviously, he saw the message.
Well, now I remember where I was going with that, or maybe not with that, but the objections thing. It reminded me so earlier in the Paul series, we talked about Paul being a master litigator, kind of. Paul's like a miracle worker in a sense, like in one sense, just that he can talk himself out of absolutely any death sentence throughout. So, this guy. He
doesn't manage to.
If you believe that, like, it's one of those things where if you want to know how powerful the word, a word can be, this Paul character is talking himself out of death sentence. Jesus here really shows his litigation skills in a different way. He communicates in this very parabolic storytelling way in a manner that basically, and the expert in the law, something to remember here, an expert in the law, Pharisee, right? This is a Hebrew, this is a Jewish Hebrew leadership, expert in the law. This would have been someone like Paul, someone who trained under a person like Gamaliel.
Oh, hold on, though. We saw, we hear about Jesus as a child, and he ends up talking with elders. He's always portrayed as a really wise guy. And by the way, I don't know if we want to cover this. We don't want to cover this today. But Thomas's gospel of Jesus, the infant. Holy crow, man! Ignoring that, though, I would hope that Jesus comes off better than the lawyer, smarter than the lawyer. And that famous bit about the render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. He makes the point that he's not here to contradict the law, and he thinks he's speaking for the law, so he better be better than the lawyer.
Exactly.
Like Jesus is supposed to be an expert in the law.
See, one of these things that gets so lost in the debate of is the Bible correct or not is Jesus. Because you're right. Jesus is bold, and he's claiming to be the law, and that his law is better than the law that's being conveyed. Well, we can look at that based on what we know, based on both secular and biblical text about who Jesus or Yeshua, was, and we can actually grade that ourselves. And we can even take that in context.
Because we still have the law in the form of the Old Testament.
And we have the law in the form of how we operate in society today, like the formal constructed law of our government even. And we can look at the teachings of Jesus against even that. And we can even make an agreement that, this dude actually has a better perspective. And at that point, if you can agree on that, you really shouldn't have to agree on anything else. You have to agree that, I believe he was the Son of God. But you don't have to believe that, or anyone else doesn't have to believe that, to believe that his perspective may provide a better perspective for living than the other perspectives professed forward over time. And I think that people...
No. That's why when you mention, modern traditions, the laws that we have brought down to the modern day, well, we can reflect back and say, well, did Jesus really have his stuff together? Well, except that to the degree that the stories of Jesus influenced modern politics, he may have created it as much as anticipated it.
Yeah,
sure.
That's a great created as much as anticipated it. Interesting. So like spoken word creation almost.
Well, just the influence, right? If
Yeah.
people think that he's got his shit together, then more people are going to say, well, maybe we should make laws in keeping with his idea.
Yeah, that'll be another one, because that'll be the improbability from a literal probability perspective of 120 people, and with all of the different kind of faiths and religions that have died over the years, actually expanding to over billions, and that being predicted. So, I mean, and that's just to speak to the concept that Christ put forward. You don't have to at that point agree on him being a deity or not. You can just agree that his concept was so powerful that it took from 120 and expanded over billions, and now has probably been the liberating component to the point that we have liberation. Now, we don't have the amount we should, but it's been the most liberating government component that we've had ever,
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Kant's categorical imperative?
I'm not.
Kant basically tried to enshrine the golden rule with his categorical imperative. And the basic idea is that everybody should always act as though their moral principles would become universal. In other words, if the moral principles you use wouldn't be appropriate for everybody to use, then you probably shouldn't use them.
I like that.
But it's the golden rule. It's the golden rule in a philosophical format. And it's, believe it or not, it's not really worth talking about much beyond that, because Kant is mostly full of crap. But that's one place where he happened to fold in great with this discussion. So I thought I'd drop that.
Nice.
But we're pushing an hour, so we should probably call it good.
Yeah, let's do that. So, well, right on. Appreciate everyone hanging out. And yeah, hey, do we want to, not now, but or maybe do one of those Maq Mack unpacks at some point, or how about this? Or you go ahead.
I was just going to zoom in on the picture, even though it's a terrible picture. Take care of yourself before you worry about others. And there's economic principles behind that, and it's not too surprising that a Jew, Jesus, would bring economic principles to play, because we know for a fact that the Hebrews have very good economic principles baked into their religious traditions.
Yeah.
There's something to say about moral principles being effective because of the wider order, which mostly is economic.
Well, scaling, right? So basically, if you do take care of yourself and others take care of themselves, the scaling impact will be much more. You'll be able to, more things can be taken care of in that manner than if you individually try to take care of everything else around you. So like if you have extended family and all of their life screwed up, and they are constantly calling you and you're trying to help them in every way, it's like the minute they start taking care of themselves happens when you say, I'm not going to keep doing this, I'm going to focus on me. And it's remarkable. then it's almost like they might go through a little wilderness period, for lack of a better phrase, but within, relatively short time, a lot of times, those family members will start taking care of themselves, all because you took care of yourself. So my bad, I could go on for an hour. So.
Well, there's something to say about, you're also being a good example in addition to giving yourself powers to carry out.
Yep. So, well, right on. Yeah, and we'll do an unpack here. We'll talk after that. So, right on, everyone popping on. It was a fun discussion. Appreciate you guys going with it. So,
yeah, thanks for dropping by and participating and watching as David and I explore a little bit more about our common traditions, our common heritage.
Yep, it's fun. So, and me and Tom, my bad, I won't go, but we don't necessarily agree philosophically on like the faith part either. And that's what we don't have to talk about that, but I think it's pretty cool because I think me and Tom actually provide a pretty decent example of how two people who don't fully agree on the faith side could potentially have productive discussion, because that doesn't happen much.
We can still agree about how to disagree.
Yep, exactly. So, all right. Well, appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.
All right, take care, man.
Yep, thanks.